Have you ever picked up a small child and realized, oh no, this is bad. I cannot keep doing this for very long. This hurts. I'm going to hurt myself. That's our topic for today. This is Open Mind Alexander Technique. I'm Jess. This topic comes from a viewer request, which is wonderful. So, as always, if anyone has questions of any particular situations or activities they want me to cover, I'm totally open. So, we're going to look at a few different aspects today of interacting with and picking up, being around tiny humans, babies and toddlers in particular. So we're actually going to start this by looking at just bending mechanics in general. Because whenever you're dealing with something that is down, such as a person who is significantly shorter than you, if not unable to walk at all, and therefore is on the ground, we have to figure out how do we interact with down. This goes back to our basic movement mechanics. I've got tons of previous videos on this, so feel free to go check those out if you want to dive more in depth into a lot of this stuff. We're going to look briefly today at our basic bending mechanics and why this is much safer and more effective than this. So, your spine is stacked like a tower of Legos on top of each other. It's a nice wavy tower. Your spine has 4 natural curves to it. But none of those curves, or none of that nice inherent flexibility, is somewhere where we want to put a really consistent sharp bend for a prolonged period of time. So there's 2 different variables going on there. How far are you going, and how long are you staying there? The third variable that's going to come up a little bit less with this particular activity than things like weightlifting is how much weight are you lifting while you're there. That's another variable. Today we're looking mainly at things that really aren't that hard to carry for short periods of time, but oh my gosh, if you try it for a long time, you're going to struggle. So what I've got today, rather than needing to borrow a friend's small human, is I realized that my weighted blanket feels extremely similar to a unruly, noodly toddler who is just like ragdolling and doesn't want to be picked up. So I have that. It's currently in this bag on the floor next to me because I want to start today by looking at how do we bend and pick up things that are associated with small children, such as bags, before I get to actually pulling the floppy toddler out of the bag. So when I go to bend, I'm really not going to bend my spine very much at all away from my neutral. I'm not going to try to over-straighten my spine because my spine's not straight. I'm going to allow this easy, soft connection between the very top of my spine, which connects between my ears behind my nose, all the way down to the bottom of the pelvis. So where is it that I actually bend? My hip joints, my knees, and my ankles. This is going to look very similar to how a lot of people are taught to lift heavy stuff, right? If you are someone who lifts weights either recreationally as part of your job, this is part of the whole lift with your legs, not your back idea. Your legs are a whole lot stronger than your back, and these joints are going to be much happier to be bent to tight angles, rather extreme angles, more so than your flexible pool noodle spine. So when I go to pick up this bag, I'm bending at my hip joints, knees, and ankles in order to pick this up. Let's not put it on the side with the microphone. As you can hear from my voice there, this is not light. So when I'm carrying something heavy, particularly something that I cannot carry equal weight, like split straps like a backpack, there's a few different things I need to keep in mind. What you'll see a lot of people do automatically is overcompensate for it and really hike up the shoulder that the bag is on. The problem with this is, what have I done to the rest of myself? I've prioritized not letting this slip off of my shoulder by doing things that are unhelpful for my own organization. Frequently, I'm going to need to leave a hand holding this so that it doesn't completely slip and fall off, especially depending on what fabric my shirt is and how slippery the fabric of the bag is. This stuff is very slippery, so it's gonna slip pretty easily. So rather than needing to torque my spine to the side like this, I'm gonna keep my shoulders fairly neutral, maybe not exact, but pretty close. And I can use other methods, other tools, in order to keep the stupid thing on my shoulder. The main one for that is just going to be keeping my hand on it. So my thumb is underneath the strap of the bag, and then my hand can curl around that. And then this is quite stable, it's not going anywhere. I'm not always going to be able to do that, especially if I'm dealing with, I need to carry a bag and suddenly there's this small human that I need to take care of and monitor and keep from running off and doing something they shouldn't do. So in those cases, I can do things like shift it behind me with my elbow for a second as I go to bend down. So right here, what I've done is I've shoved it behind me, so now the weight is on my back, and I can allow this very gentle spiral along the axis of my spine to allow this to stay back and not flop over and fall to the side. So let me demonstrate that spiral without the bag. Here's what we're looking at. I can rotate around the axis of my spine straight up and down, or I can do that at an angle. So I'm rotating hips, knees, and ankles first into a bend, and then I'm rotating around the axis of my spine, which is now diagonal. So it's here. When I do that, this lets me do several different movements without putting my spine into really stressed, bent positions. So I'm differentiating here, again, between a bend and a spiral. I've talked about that a good bit on this channel before. We don't have great words for that in English, so I have to decide on my own here. This is what I'm calling a spiral around the axis of the spine, versus this would be a bend. And that's that side-to-side or forward-backward bend that makes your nice stacked vertebrae go at an angle and take pressure on one side and overstretch on the other. So if they're stacked neutrally, the pressure on the nice squishy cartilage disc in between those bones has equal pressure. If I'm really consistently bending that at any one spot for prolonged periods of time with a high frequency, doing it a lot, that area will start to have some problems because now we've got unbalanced pressure on a soft, squishy thing. And this is one of the things that can contribute to long-term issues with spine health and cartilage discs and all of those things that can be a problem, especially as we get older. So with my bag here, when I put this on, notice that not much in my torso, my core, needed to move. It's a little bit of counterbalancing because, again, this is not light. And you can hear in my voice that I'm just slightly out of breath, having been handling this a lot. But as I go to pick this up, it's just a bicep curl, right? Where I'm lifting something up to my shoulder and then putting it on. Another option with picking up bags like this is to lift it in the opposite hand and then place it on your shoulder. More like that. That one's going to be very stable and is especially going to be helpful if you need to like hold something in that hand, put this on, various different configurations that will happen when you have a small child in the mix and you're trying to hold 6 things at once. So now we're going to take the blanket out of the bag here, which is why I didn't want to have to put it back in again in order to do that demonstration. So this is my pseudo-toddler. Very floppy and ungainly and in general just wants to be on the floor. So what do most people do the second they pick up a baby or a toddler? Here we are. What have I just done? I'm going to show you this from the back so you can watch my spine. It's a little bit easier to see from the back. So here's my neutral, and here is where I ended up. What changed. A lot of times we'll describe this as I've stuck out my hip, right? Because that's really the goal here. I want to be able to put this toddler on the side of my pelvis where that bone kind of sticks out a little bit. It's going to stick out to a greater degree on some people than others. And I can rest it on that. Now, this can be totally fine for short periods of time. But let's look at the two different variables that we mentioned earlier. How far are you going with it, and how long are you there? I find that a lot of folks really overdo this because they're really thinking, oh, it's good to have the weight supported by my skeleton, therefore I should put it all possible weight of the child into the side of my hip, so then that just goes straight down my legs. Well, the problem with that, if you're going really far with it for long periods of time, is going to hit two different places. One of them is, how did I actually bend? It's in my low back, it's in my spine. And my spine had to go sideways. So when I am asking vertebrae, the bones that make up my spine, to go sideways, I am creating pressure on one side and overstretch on the other. And again, that's fine for short periods of time, especially if you're not going really far with it. But a lot of people will go really far, and they're out here. I'm going to stay here for a few seconds while I explain this, and then I'll tell you how I feel at the end of it. When I first started doing this, I was not in pain anywhere in this area, and then I'm going to compare it to after I'm done talking about it. So, when I stick the hip out sideways, the rotation for that compared to my neutral is in my low spine, my lumbar spine. And then I also have now my femur, my thigh bone, going pretty far in towards my center. That's also going to put my weight really off balance. I can totally lift my other leg right now. It's not taking any weight, it's just barely there. As a result, I'm effectively standing on one foot for the entire duration of time that I'm here. And that's going to make this leg tired. If you think about how much time would you want to spend deliberately standing on one foot, balance aside, this leg is going to get tired within about a minute. This is actually an exercise that I do deliberately to work on one leg balance and stabilization and endurance, where I'm not sticking my hip out, I'm neutral, but I'm just going to be on one foot. And I can tell you that my muscles will start to cramp by about a minute 30 to 2 minutes. This is a lot of work in my standing leg. So when I go into this, that's what I'm asking my leg to do. All my weight into one leg, plus the additional weight of toddler and bags. That's a lot. Don't ask your leg to do that for prolonged periods of time. It's not good for it. It doesn't want to do that. So there's the leg aspect, and then there's the spine aspect, right? Neither of these is a very healthy or efficient or effective place to be for more than, a minute or two. That's really about the limit. It's about how long I've been here. I don't have a clock in front of me, but I feel like that's about how long it's been. I am noticing a pinch in the inside corner of my thigh, where this has to go at a pretty sharp angle. I'm noticing a feeling of kind of overstretch on the outside of my hip. I feel like I've been stretching it. I'm noticing that my low back is tight on one side especially. It's uncomfortable. I wouldn't say that it's like at the pain point, but it's not comfortable. I notice that I'm getting weird feelings in the bottom of my feet as far as like my blood circulation isn't as good. It's a little bit tingly, and I keep having to shift to different parts of my foot in order to relieve that feeling. So that's part of why I've been kind of shifting here. Overall, this is just not a great place to be, depending on how far you're going into it and how long you're going to be there. So, what are some other options? Ugh, buddy. Okay. One way that you can do this is slightly proportion dependent. I happen to be someone who has a good bit of difference between the width of my lower ribs, right at my waist, where I go in the most, versus the outside of my hip. And that's going to totally vary depending on different people. I don't need to go that far to the side to have enough of the side of my pelvis underneath this so that it actually can rest there without too much difficulty, without me needing to leave neutral. Not everybody can do that, of course. Not everyone has hips that are wider than waist by a substantial margin like I do. But what this kind of illustrates is maybe you don't have to go as far as you think. Depending on what the kid is wearing versus what you're wearing, there might be a good friction just between their clothes and your clothes. If you're going to be there for a while, you can really consider some other options of, how to carry the kid in the first place. We'll look at some of those in a second. So how is it that I'm really holding this up right now? It's a combination of, yes, I am still resting it on the top of my pelvis here because I have proportions that can do that, but I'm also just using my arm. I'm not really lifting it with my arm upward. I'm mainly just holding it in. And that's actually a fairly efficient movement because that uses a bunch of different places on my arm to keep it in, and I'm also using my biceps in order to keep my elbow bent and keep that in. This tends to work a little bit better. But as always, there's going to be a time limit on this. So this is when, it's totally reasonable to switch sides. If you've got somebody else there with you, switch people, switch off who has carrying the child duty. A lot of kids also, once they get into like older toddler age, can actually hold on a good bit with their legs on their own. And you can talk to them about that and talk to them, once they get to be, 2.5, 3, you can start to have conversations about, hey, when I carry you, I feel tired. Can you help hold on to me like you're climbing a tree? Make it fun, make it exciting, something that they go, I like climbing things. And, bring a game into it, and that can help get the kid a little bit more on board with, buddy, you gotta help this situation. So, other options. Don't be ashamed to use equipment. Slings are great. There are very valid reasons that so many cultures around the world have baby slings as part of their traditional child rearing setup. In the US, they kind of went out of style for a very long time and now are starting to come back. But there's some weird oh, that's somehow cheating if I'm, strapping my child to me in some way. No, it's not. It's using your resources. Slings are great. Baby slings are wonderful. Toddler holders and backpacks are great. One thing that you'll see around where I live in Colorado a whole lot is backpacking setups with babies and toddlers where what I'll see as I'm out hiking is a set of frequently 2 parents, because that's a lot of work to try to do on your own. And they trade off who's carrying the backpack that has the toddler and who's carrying the backpack that has the food and water and other stuff in it. And they switch off. And there's a lot of people that do that, so it must be working well for them. And when I see them doing it, it makes sense to have a bag to load the child into, and then they're comfy. They can hang out there. They're good. They like being up high frequently. They can see around. It's a nice vantage point for them. So slings are great. Baby backpacks of various different styles are great. Just keep in mind, as always, that if you're going to put something on, how are you responding to that? Your use of yourself is still important there. So I hope this was a helpful dive into how are we picking up kids and lifting them and moving them around. I would encourage all parents and aunts and uncles and anyone who has a small child in their life, especially childcare workers who are doing this all the time, you are a priority. I would encourage you to think of yourselves as a priority in this situation. One of the best things that you can do is make sure that you are taken care of and stable and regulated and efficient and sustainable in the way that you are caring for children around you. Because that's going to keep you from going into burnout and stress and needing to shove the stressful thing away from yourself, which has a lot of problems to it. So, approaching this task as a job, and we can use gear for our jobs, and we can make sure that we are well organized all throughout that process.